All right. So first off, I want to say welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining the entrepreneurship track here at Startup Slam for unlocking the $1.2 trillion market, how tech and entrepreneurship can support Black communities with Yamila Franco and Debbie Motilewa. I'm hoping that I pronounced that right. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos that Debbie had posted, and so I think I got it. My name's Andrew. I'm so thrilled to be your moderator for the entrepreneurship track today. We're just going to kind of go through a few housekeeping things, just like you've done in other sessions, and then we're gonna get going. So first off, we've got our chat over on the side, which I'm sure you've all already seen or used. As we're going through the awesome talk, if you have questions for the presenters, you can throw them in the chat. I'll be there to moderate them. So either they might get addressed during the presentation or at the very end, there'll be some time that's there. If there's something that's really immediate, feel free to keep just throwing things in the chat, and I'm happy to respond to questions that are unrelated to kind of the presentation. Recordings may be available through the LinkedIn group after the Startup Slam event today. I'll post a link to that a little bit later on. So just before I make our introductions to our amazing speakers, I just want to again sort of do a big shout out to Virtual CFO Solutions, the sponsor for this theme. You can connect with them if you're interested in finding out more about what they do at the Connect with an Expert. Those virtual booths are available only till 1, so there's only like about an hour and a half left if you want to take advantage of that, and you can find out more about signing up for that over in the reception, and definitely worth checking out. So without further ado, I'm so pleased to introduce our two presenters today who are going to knock your socks off with an amazing presentation, I am absolutely sure. So our first presenter, who's on the screen just below me, but maybe above or beside, depending on where you are, is Yamila Franco. So Yamila is a co-founder of Afro Hub Marketplace. She's worked in the areas of STEM education, leading Indigenous and all-girls programming in tech, with the school district to support with the transition to a more inclusive and well-rounded curriculum, and is a strong advocate for the inclusion of BIPOC communities in entrepreneurship and financial literacy. This year, Yamila was recognized with the Youth REP Award. I'm not sure what the REP stands for, but I'm sure she will share it for her community leadership, and is co-creating Be Free, a business incubator program for Indigenous, racialized, and newcomer communities. Our other speaker is Debbie Motilewa, who's a pioneer and leader in the field of sustainable business development and has taught and practiced the principles of management, organizational behavior, and sustainable business for the past 9 years across 3 different continents: North America, Africa, and Europe. In the startup world, she runs 2 social enterprises, the Volunteer NG and the previously mentioned Afro Hub Community. They both focus on community development and personal development. So without further ado, I'm going to turn off my my camera, and I'm going to turn it over to Yamila and Debbie to talk about an amazing presentation today, unlocking the $1.2 trillion market. So over to you, Yamila.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew, for the introduction. And for everyone who is watching, and I know we'll have people joining and watching this recording later on as well, Debbie's actually going to be in the chat and she's going to be supporting us. But if you've got any questions, Debbie's able to jump in the screen and be able to share, because this will be more of an interactive session. And so if you can hear me well, I just want to do a sound check. If you can please type in yes in the chat, just to double check that you can hear me, that there are no questions. Yes. Okay. Awesome. And I'm going to proceed because I also want to share my screen. And we are going. Perfect. So right now you should be able to see my screen as well. Perfect. So it is working. So thanks everyone again for coming today. As a few housekeeping things, we are going to be doing is more of an interactive session. So And as part of this interactive session, I want to test out how it will work if we are going to jump into Mural. So later on, I'm going to be posting a link. So I'm going to ask you that if we are participating and you're actively engaging, just stay for a while so that we can complete one activity in Mural, as well as potentially an activity on Mentimeter, so that you can have something that you worked on and you can take home. And based on this, I actually, not just taking home, but taking it with you to your businesses, to your organizations, your communities, etc., so that you have an idea of actionable steps that you can take out from here, and that can actually help you in, unlock. And it's not a small number. And really what we want to focus on today is how technology and entrepreneurship, and I should also add intrapreneurship, how can that support Black communities? But for many of us, let's say, if you're a business owner or if you have employees, if you're working with teams, this is going to be applying equally, because at the end of the day, if your goal is to raise leaders in your business or in your community, then these are principles that we can all apply. And so moving on with who we are today. So thank you, Andrew, so much for the really awesome introduction that you did. In my case, I'm a social entrepreneur. I have been working with AfroHub Market Space. I have been working with Ignite. I also run another social enterprise called Nayoka Design Labs. We're more in the startup and now scaling stage, but always engaged in the community and always engaged very much in the entrepreneurial community, more in the area of technology, clean technology, social enterprise, sustainable development goals, etc. And Deborah, she's a professor at BCIT. A few exciting things with Debbie, but a really huge source of knowledge. And I want to also invite everyone, if you would like, we're going to be posting, and Debbie is going to add our LinkedIn information as well, because you can reach out to us directly or anyone in the team to continue the conversation afterwards. But we're super excited to be with you here today. So I wanted to start a conversation with this. So according to Stats Canada, 67% of Canada's Black population ranks in the bottom half of the family income distribution. That's over half of Canada's Black population. Bringing this community very similar in stats, to Indigenous communities here, to some newcomer communities, to racialized communities. And that's something that definitely has been, a big part of the conversation, especially since the coronavirus pandemic started, because as well, this same communities, and I want to be more inclusive, not just Black communities, have been just more negatively affected throughout this pandemic. And especially when you look at what has been happening in the United States since the offset of the whole, Black Lives Matter boom that we had in the middle of the pandemic, really, you have to ask yourselves, what are we doing that is not working, and what can we do differently? Especially in the world of tech, where we are scaling up businesses, we are, we're constantly innovating, we're working together, again, with diverse teams. If you're based in Victoria, Vancouver, definitely your teams are probably going to be pretty diverse, but everywhere else in the world. And so if you want to be successful, we have to acknowledge that there's certain things that we can implement, whether it is in our organization or maybe through policymaking, or even with how we interact with the people around us. And that's why we wanted to focus on entrepreneurship today, because entrepreneurship can be a catalyst for empowering every community. Also, however, when you find entrepreneurs from these racialized communities, and I personally don't love the words, but that's how we classify them. You look at the BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color, you find that business owners in these areas often fail at higher rates than others. And so the question here is why? And how can we harness the power of the Black community? How can we leverage technology to be a tool for true inclusion of diverse communities? And so this is where we can even link this to the business case of diversity. And I want to ask in the chat, if you can type a quick yes. Type yes if you've ever heard of the business case of diversity before. And I guess this is a case where I could do a poll, but I want to bring comments here. So not wrong answer. I just wanted to have an idea. And if not, okay. So Debbie definitely knows about the business case of diversity. And if you have not, it doesn't mean it's nothing bad, it's nothing good either. But there's been, and if you Google even quickly, so many pointers towards when you have diverse teams, when you actually include different communities, even in your design stage in your business, in the products that you make, you end up realizing that you can actually create products with those target communities in mind. Is, for example, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, except now you're bringing together a team or people that can have those lived experiences, those ways of thinking, those ways of being. And ultimately, the business case of diversity adds up to the idea, oh, hi, Brooke, welcome. The business case of diversity adds to the idea that by bringing different ideas together, again, different ways of being, different thoughts, we can actually create and include those markets in the things that we launch, whether it is through our marketing, through our communications. A really good example that I heard personally is when you look at scissors, you look at, trackpads, mouse, usually all of these products are made for right-handed people, right? Even when you go to university, you realize most of the chairs are made for right-handed people. But when you specifically design a product for somebody who is right-handed, you're automatically excluding a huge population that is the left-handed community. And so personally, I'm left-handed. So when I find products, which are very rare and that are targeted towards left-handed people with ease of use, etc., I'm all over it. I get super excited, but at the same time, I realize how this other product, for not being more flexible, more versatile, maybe because they assumed that everybody was right-handed, they were excluding me as a potential buyer. And that's not what we want to foster here. We want to bring forward ideas and a planning process where we can all figure out what can we implement in our organizations and to bring this change. And potentially for our organizations to bring that greater revenue, that greater success, also linked to impact. And so in the chat, quickly, for me to have an idea, what are your areas of work? This is something that we can all add. If you can type it in the chat, if you're in the area of HR, if you are, if you're a CEO, maybe you're in management. Okay, so we got Brooke, and I know Brooke is actually connecting from the US, so that's really awesome. But we got Brooke in supply chain. And I'm just going to give a minute for everyone to add your answers. So some areas, if you might be wondering, so we have some people that work in operations. So people work at the C executive position. And I'll give 1 minute while I actually set something up here to share. Okay, so I got Brooke working in supply chain. I know Debbie works in strategy. I'm working in the areas of impact. So we have an idea here where potentially we're in leadership positions in the organizations we're on. Okay, now I want to bring this now to the next question, because when we look at the areas we work on, whether it is that we have a C-level executive position or not, we need to ask ourselves in our organizations, creating spaces that are safer, where you're actually fostering diversity, where you're, even throughout your recruitment strategy, bringing together diverse voices to your workspace. Is that one of your strategic goals? Is it actually in the mandate of your organization, or again, in your policies? Or is that a conversation you've had with your HR department? And I'm going to leave this question here for a second as I switch to. And this is now, again, when we go, we need to start asking ourselves if we actually want to unlock this 1.2 trillion market. And when I say a 1.2 trillion market, I'm actually referring to the power only in this case from the Black community. And there was actually a research that came out, which if you wanted to find it, I can actually link it, or Debbie can find it and link it. It was specifically speaking about where do Black dollars go. And this research was even just focusing in the United States. It wasn't even looking at Canada or the rest of the world, where we know that, especially, now that we are, because of COVID and pandemic, we're staying at home. There's a peak in shopping, especially online shopping, more than ever before. There's new products being launched, new companies. So the question here is, are you losing on this market? Are you losing on tapping onto this market? And before we even say yes or no, I mean, I bet you can look at your numbers. The question is, what products or services is your business selling? And who are you designing this for? Now, your design might be universal, but what might change your target audience might be your branding or your communication. To what degree do social and environmental goals steer the company? And the reason this is important is because right now, especially with consumer mindset shifting, we realize that, and research shows that people are actually becoming more aware. They care more about where they buy and why they buy or who is selling. You probably heard about Simon Sinek. You have to start with why. And that's because right now we're shifting towards an economy where people buy based on the why, not even the problem that you solve. And so people are more than ever looking to support companies that live their values. And how are people going to know what are your values if you don't have them maybe clearly stated on your website, on your mandate, on your strategic goals? How is your team internally in your company going to know this? Now, if you have a surplus, is this redirected in pursuit of social or environmental goals? And I'm heading here a little bit into social entrepreneurship because when we look at the growth and the financial gains of companies, comparing a social enterprise with one that is not a social enterprise, again, people and communities and employees are actually shifting towards wanting to have more purpose in their work that they're doing. You see that with the younger generation. So if you're in the recruitment and retaining stage as well, you realize that you need to provide people that extra. And what is that extra? That's the mission, the vision. Why will they work with you? Now, does the company implement a business process that benefits society or the environment? And this is a really big one. And, you have great examples like Patagonia, which is kind of like a gold standard when you see how are companies reinvesting their profits and still being profitable. However, reinvesting part of those profits towards advancing the goals, where it's not just writing it in paper, it's moving past the mandate. You say you have a mandate to maybe advance this equity, diversity, and inclusion in your company, but what are you actually doing? And how are you reinvesting this money to support communities? And the beautiful part about Patagonia, because I see companies that are doing great, but they're not communicating it with the community itself. So at the end of the day, people don't know what is happening. And so the last one, which I think is the most important actually for what we're doing today, is does the company have an impact on community by training and or employing people that are typically excluded from the mainstream economy? And this is one where if you're looking to unlock this 1.2 trillion market and including more Black entrepreneurs, this is, I think, the key one where when it comes, again, to your whole organization structure, this has to be part of the organization itself. But now the question is, how do we do this properly? And what approach should we take? Because definitely, if you show up at your workplace and say like, oh, we definitely should be including more, Black, Indigenous people of color, or maybe, we should target more of our products towards Black people, what are they going to tell you back, right? They don't have the background information. In fact, it's a decision that maybe you took alone. And that's where co-creation and collaboration has to come from a top-down approach and also bottom-up, where everybody has to come on board from the organization and understand the why we do what we do, not just from the financial gain perspective, which I understand if you have investors, if you have, a board of directors, they're interested in that, so they want to know a why, but also you have to have your team on board. And what I wanted to switch to, and I invite everyone, and we're going to test it out because we are a smaller group today, but I actually opened up a mural for us to switch into the workshop part of the activity and brainstorm ways where we could all look at what approaches could we take to bring these services into, or to bring this change into our business. But before I switch into a mural, because we're just 7, I'm actually going to try something different. and we're going to do a Mentimeter instead. Okay. So if anyone here, if you've ever used Mentimeter, basically what's going to happen, you can use your phone while you're looking at the presentation here live, and you're going to see, I'm going to give you a code, you're going to enter, there's going to be a question, and we're going to create a word cloud. And this word cloud, we can debrief, we can use it to build up on our activities, okay? So the question is, does the company have an impact on community by training or employing people that are typically excluded, etc.? So I'm just going to mute myself for a second. Just one moment, it is loading. So that's interesting, Brooke. You mentioned that it's in the mandate. And so here's the question about other businesses that maybe are starting to dive deeply or starting to look into, even including it in their mandate, right? Is how are we going to do that? And so my screen is loading and it's coming. My apologies for the delay. I'm going to continue with the slides while this part is actually loading. But the next part of my question now, when we look at the mandate, is your mandate aligned with a framework that can become now a universal language for everyone in the organization? And I actually wanted to introduce you to the Sustainable Development Goals. And some of you might have already seen the Sustainable Development Goals. You've gone deeper into what this looks like. And I actually wanted to also leave you with a step you can take further of the Sustainable Development Goals. But if in your businesses, if you're aligned with any of these goals, or if maybe this is the first time you're looking, I just wanted to ask you, which goals are you aligned with? And if you don't know, and this is the first time you're looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, well, there's actually, if you search UN Sustainable Development Goals, the first UN website actually has a breakdown of all of these goals. But if you could go ahead and in the comments, I'll give you a minute to actually go and type down which Sustainable Development Goals are aligned with your mandate or with the work your organization is doing. And if not yet, then which of these goals actually sounds like it could be aligned with? So decent work, reducing inequalities, and no poverty. I'm actually going to now switch into sharing another screen so we can do the Mentimeter, and we can now create a word cloud on the answers that we share. But okay, it's working perfectly. So the same answers you're putting, if you could go into menti.com and use the code that is in the screen, it's not going to charge you anything. But what this is going to create is a word cloud that all of us can take off with us. So in terms of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which goals are you aligned with? And when I say you, I refer to your organization and the work you're doing. And so I'm going to give a minute so that we can go and actually upload our answers there. And I'm going to do that myself as well. And so the next step, if you're aware and you understand the Sustainable Development Goals and you've seen them, the question is, through which targets are you specifically advancing these goals within your organization? And the reason I bring up the targets is because, it is easier for us to bring up, like, we're bringing industry innovation and quality education. But once you look at those goals, you find goal 10, target 10.1, target 10.2. And so the question now becomes, which of these targets are we actually implementing? And now, if you were to bring this up again back to your organization, what I wanted to leave you with, besides this conversation, is how can we actually carry out an activity, or how can we bring this conversation to everyone that is with us? And that is our leadership team, but also to, if you have interns, if you have people that are volunteering, if you have advisors, etc., how do you design something? How do you design even a communication style where you can bring, why is this important? Which goals are you aligned with? How are you advancing those goals and those targets? And then again, linking this to the financial and the more profits, etc., for continue thriving. And so what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to share a link, and this will be a visitor, a mural. And so based on, I don't know if you have used Mural before. However, when you try something like this, I'm just going to give you a rundown of what this app is, and I'm going to reshare another screen right here. But Mural is an application that we can use to foster collaboration among teams. And so I'm sharing my screen so you can see it, etc. But this is something that I've started using with my teams personally in different organizations. And the reason being is because in coronavirus time, the question now is, how can we actually even have these conversations, or how can we work out strategies that are going to help us unlock this market, or that are going to help us create those inclusive spaces, or even figure out where in our production line, in our pipeline, where are we actually losing people and eventually holding back our organization's growth. And so if you can see my screen, we have our Innovators Compass. Oops, actually I'm gonna lock this one in place. So, okay, perfect. So now everything is locked in place. And so this was a challenge I wanted to bring up for everyone today. I know we're a smaller group, which can make it good. So centering on people who could be involved, for who is the problem that we're wanting to solve, who is this for? Define the principles, what matters most and why. And this is an activity that I will personally do with the whole team, and that maybe we can take a chance on right now, even though we're a smaller group. Dream ideas. What could happen, right? What is your ideal scenario? And this is seeing the big picture. Is it that, when you're looking as a labor impact assessment and you're looking at how can you actually include more people, maybe your dream idea is that to increase participation of diverse people by 15% or by 20%, or maybe you want to increase participation in leadership positions, at C-level positions in your company. And that's personally for one of my companies, that's one of my goals, because I've realized that there wasn't that participation of, Black people or even Indigenous people at C-level positions or at leadership roles. And so design experiments. What's a way to try this out? If it's going to be a branding change, what are we going to do to try it out for a moment? And then discover, observation, what's happening and why. And then this links to looking at our framework, which in this case, I'm using the UN Sustainable Development Goals as a framework. How are we going to measure our impact? And so what I want to challenge us is we're going to take 5 minutes and we're going to do a sprint. And we're going to take 5 minutes to go, in this case, a minute per question, for all of us to actually add a Post-it note with an answer or an idea that aligns with your organization. And that's okay, because we can learn what are our principles, what are our ideas, what are our goals, etc. But from here, we can take a big picture, and I'm going to leave you with an idea of what that you can take with you from here. So if you're looking at my screen, if you go to text, you can drag and drop Post-it notes. And I know a lot of you are probably looking at, instead of my screen, you're looking at the presentation itself. But we're going to start timing ourselves starting with principles. What matters most? So my question for everyone here is, if you take one Post-it note or if you write a note, what are the principles that matter either to you or your organization? And I invite you to take a Post-it note and to add your answers in here. If you can brainstorm with someone, that's great. If you want, we actually have a texting, the opportunity to message each other as comments. So if you have any questions, you can add them to the comments here on the mural, or you can add them to the presentation itself. So my question here is, what are your principles? Principles are sustainability. For me, business sustainability, and like Debbie mentioned at first, we want to build businesses that are going to last. So when we speak to sustainability, we sometimes think about environmental, which is so important for us, but we are building a social enterprise and we want it to be long lasting. We want it to have that long-term impact in our communities. So for us, sustainability is a big principle. And so if I give you 1 minute to go in and to add one principle from your organization, my question is, what is that principle? An alternative way of adding your answers is you can actually add it as a comment and I can read them and I can add them here. 2 ways to add comments through Mural. You can message me directly if you don't want to participate, although we all have different figures, different animals, etc. Or you can also add your answer. So Brooke mentioned transparency. I'm just going to add it in the mural. Okay, so we're starting and we have principles, what matters most. And then the question is why? My advice for doing something like this is that you actually figure out your why with your broader team. And so this is something that you can do. For example, if you have 3 days of the week, you set aside 3 days and you say 1 hour of each day, maybe at the start of your workday, you're going to get together and get your day going by doing activities like this one. So you all define what your principles are as a team and you identify, why does this matter? Now the question is, dream ideas, what could happen? If your ultimate goal is to actually bring more inclusion of diverse communities, right? Maybe you want to include more Black people, maybe Indigenous, you're looking at women, whatever community you're targeting as you want to see them more involved, engaged, what are some ideas? And I can tell you, ideas can come from barriers itself. And I'd like to rephrase this, what are the things that are already in place that are not working? And I can tell you one thing that is not working, if you look at research, if you look at reports, is the lack of representation in the fields we want to bring these people to. So maybe could it be that as your branding and your recruitment strategy, you're actually going to, not stereotype or not tokenize, but you're going to change your image. You're going to change that branding and your whole organizational perspective. So what is one idea that we could implement? And there's no wrong ideas here. So a game I like to play when running something like this too is yes and, or what if. So what if we did this, and that? What if we launch a new marketing campaign that would be focused on interviewing leaders in the same field that I want to recruit in? And we're going to be featuring the voices of diverse leaders in those areas. And so if I'm looking for people in the area of finances, I'm going to specifically make sure I amplify the voices of those people in finances to bring them here. Using my methods, I will share those diverse perspectives, stories, etc. And that's a way of, I can tell you already that when companies have a branding or align with communities that they want to serve, that's also another way of attracting and recruiting as well. So with the ideas, and I just gave an idea and its fermentation, I'm going to give you 2 choices with this one. If we have our principle, how can we do something new? So when you think of what is currently happening in your organizations, where are you lacking? Where do you find those challenges? And I want you to bring those challenges because we can turn them into ideas, maybe in the comments, or if you wanted to add them here in a post-it as well. I'm going to give a minute so we can think about the challenges or the ideas themselves. Another way of looking at ideas will be by asking, what is that thing that, again, I already tried to implement, and that is your idea. It didn't work. It's still an idea. So you can even break down that idea further with your team and see what in this step specifically did not work well. And a way of taking that idea into a different scenario or break it down is by doing a scenario map. And I actually had a scenario map here. Depending on how many people we had in the session, we would have actually been divided in teams, etc. But if you have a scenario and this is your idea scenario, what are the steps that you're going or that you should be taking to achieve that goal and solve that problem? Of all of those steps, what are you currently doing to fulfill those steps and complete them? When you're brainstorming, what comes to mind and how does that make you feel, or how does that make the team feel? Because at the end of the day, when you're actually talking again about bringing diverse communities together, sure, we have our values of diversity, transparency, and sustainability, but your team has to be on board because they're the ones who are going to be also doing that outreach with you. They're the ones who are going to be sharing their stories, their experiences. And I can tell you that if any of these values or principles, if they align with your teams, they're going to be more engaged. They're going to be more eager to even bring their own communities in and invite people. So breaking this down, if you see it as a continuous loop, the main point here is that there's iteration. You're going to be taking ideas, what could happen. You're going to design your experiments, discover your observations, and from there, again, you're going to go back to another planning tool like a scenario map. And from this scenario map, you look at the steps, again, that you took, what worked, what didn't, what are you doing, what are you thinking, and what are you feeling? Why is feeling important in something like this? Because ideally, you will be creating solutions to bring a community in or to invite a community with that community. And that's the final step, which I believe a lot of businesses, when I look at their outreach strategies or even their recruitment strategies, they're not necessarily including in people from those same communities in the conversation or even in the tasks that are happening. And so I wanted to bring this up as a tool for you. And just a quick overview as Mural. If you have not used something like this before, by no means, we're not partnered with Mural. However, it is a tool that can facilitate remote work among teams. So if you were at any point directing or designing a strategy to actually bring people together and to enter new markets, key points, you can do things like, when you do your customer discovery, where you actually are reaching out to that community to figure out what they would like to see. That's one. A way of doing that, if you were to host an open house or if you were to host an event, and you can invite people to brainstorm with you in a mural. The reason I really like this app, and you're going to see too, is that we also have templates. We have frameworks. We have business model canvas templates that are already created. And I know it's not loading right now, so you can't see it. There. So we have several templates that we can use when we're doing activities like this one to actually bring people together and to capture those different ideas. This is a low-risk scenario. As you can see, all of you are coming as anonymous guests to my board. And so my question is, following up, if you were to implement something like this in your workspace, I personally implemented it to plan strategy with whole teams who are around the world. I've used it to break down problems and processes and identify where we're stuck. So if you were to leverage something like this, what will you do with it? What problem will you be trying to solve? And where do you think this can come in? So, Brooke, thank you for sharing. Lack of support in proof of market. Okay, so I have a question, Brooke. If you could actually type in a little bit of how does this look, because I'm actually interested in that challenge, in that lack of support in proof of market. And I get an idea that maybe here, what we could work on is maybe even customer discovery, where it does also give me an idea of, and I can talk with you afterwards because I know we're connected. We can actually brainstorm ways where we could implement a strategy like leveraging Mural, different customer discovery, or maybe even working with your teams more closely too. But this being said, I'm going to switch back to the presentation. Chun, chun, chun. Okay, perfect. So back to our goals. So throughout this presentation, I've been talking about sustainable development, social enterprises. And maybe you don't self-identify as a social enterprise. Maybe you are asking yourself, what is, like, how can I even treat my revenue model or the work I'm doing or the community I am serving? What can I do differently to add those aspects of impact? And so I can attract people that are impact driven as well, which is a huge thing with us and for us as well. And so I want to leave you with another tool that is the UN Global Compact. And I'm going to share the link in the comments so we can all take a look at this. So for those of you, okay, Brooke, I see. And I get that one. I have to talk to you, or I have to talk with you about this because I'm actually navigating investors right now as well. So here's something that if you're running a social enterprise, and Brooke, you will be really interested in this one, is the UN Global Compact. And so depending on what stage you're at your business, if you're not in a stage where you can target something like the UN Global Compact, or where you don't qualify yet, or when you don't, you're missing some things that they require. Well, something that you can do is, as a team, as a company goal or organization, you can say one of our goals in the next 2 years, 3 years is that we want to be able to apply and be approved under the UN Global Compact so we can become a recognized vendor. And I'll give you an example because just recently, let me see. Just on September 28th, one of my companies, Nayoka Design Lab, was actually approved after emails going back and forth of talking with the UN teams, etc. And so what that led for us is that we committed, and it was a way of showing our commitment to advancing the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but also a proof of concept that the things we were implementing as a strategy were the right steps to, again, align with this framework and align with this specific business community. In our case, for that business, Nayoka, we are entering the humanitarian aid industry. And we're looking at trading and doing business with countries that around the world. So basically other continents as well. So Brooke, I was thinking about your comment when I discovered market customers wanting to buy, but investors didn't believe me. One of the things that I think might align with your business, because I know that it is a huge focus for you to actually bring in different communities, will be looking at what the UN Global Compact might require. The application is straightforward, and they just get back and forth with questions, with just clarifications. But this is something that I am actually definitely going to bring forward to my investors. And when it comes to our proof of concept of how we are getting emails, we are getting, requests for people that want to participate or buy, we are definitely also showing like, hey, but we don't just speak about sustainability. We don't just speak about the mission. We are actually committed, and you can see it in this website, etc. It just adds that weight. But I do want to, again, take this conversation afterwards. So I wanted to bring this resource here because if you're painting a huge picture of unlocking this market and then bringing forward the idea that to unlock a market, you have to go even not just targeting that market, but you have to ask yourself, how are you affecting that community? How are you empowering those communities you want to include in your business? And how do you want to even see them included? Because I can tell you right now that if you wanted to, maybe recruit more diverse people in your workspace and bring that for product development, etc., but you're just recruiting for a chief diversity officer, is not necessarily going to work. You need to look at your policies and the different things at every level of your organization. Are you actually bringing, gender diversity? Are you creating positions and holding positions and people accountable for creating those spaces that are safer, etc., for those communities? And then when you create those positions and you bring them in, the next question comes in. Are you having and fostering a team culture and a work culture where innovation is welcome and where diverse views and perspectives are welcome. Because why? Again, the business case of diversity. And I feel weird when I have to bring that up, but I understand if you're talking to investors again, if you're talking to advisory board members that might not be there yet, or this is not even part of their language, you have to bring a case. And the case here is that there is a 1.2 trillion market waiting for brands and for businesses that align with the communities, that align with their values, with their worldviews, to support them. But you can't appropriate that. It has to be co-created. So in a few closing slides, I actually wanted to invite everyone to let's connect. And I know that I am earlier, and the reason being is because I actually wanted to just open it up for questions and to see what, based on your situations, what were some tools or resources that I could share or that we could share, Debbie and myself, to actually support you with, navigating this space. I personally I can tell you that sometimes it's weird for me, even saying that, more equity, more diversity, more inclusion, where, for example, in AfroHub, we're 10 co-founders, we're all Black. And so we're going to continue fostering equity, diversity, and inclusion. Well, in my cases, for example, how do I open it up so we can actually capture, and this is the same question, I want to capture other markets. So again, I want to invite you all, let's connect. I'm going to be sending out a survey as well, or you can reach out to us through social media, etc., to take this conversation outside. And so definitely, I want to open it up for questions now. And I know that it's weird because you can't speak. It's the only thing I don't like about this platform. But if you can type your questions in the chat, I'd be welcome them and get a conversation from there.
And we actually we can allow people to jump on video and speak if they want to. So if there's somebody that wants to jump in there, I think you can ability to go on video, so feel free if you'd rather sort of have a more of a conversation. We've got I think another 12 minutes left, so there's definitely an opportunity for that if anybody wants to. I'll approve you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Debbie.